Hello everyone! Thank you for visiting our channel. Have you ever experienced such life stories? Sarah and Jacob had been married for several years. When they first met, Jacob had his own souvenir production business, while Sarah worked for another company as an employee. After they got married, Sarah left her old job and started helping her husband. Of course, she didn't work full-time. Mostly, she took on small tasks as a personal assistant. She would go somewhere, pick something up, search for options. Everyone liked this organization. The business was thriving, and Sarah didn't sit idly by. She relieved her husband from the daily grind, and she still had plenty of free time. One workday, Sarah went to her husband's office to get some documents. At that time, he was talking to a new client, William. The men sat at a table, discussing the details of an order for a major business event in their city. Just as they were saying goodbye, Sarah walked into the office. "William, meet my beautiful wife, Sarah. A lot depends on her in this company." Jacob introduced his spouse in this manner. "Nice to meet you," William replied. Before him stood a young, incredibly attractive woman in a form-fitting dress that accentuated her slender figure. Sarah, too, curiously looked at her new acquaintance. He was so different from her husband, distinguished, with neatly styled hair and a mysterious gaze. Jacob had always been simple and open, incomparable to him. Sarah was about to take the necessary folder with the documents from the table and quickly leave, but William beat her to it. He handed her the papers directly and looked into her eyes. "Darling, do you remember the address to deliver this?" her husband asked while checking something on the computer himself. "Yes, of course," she replied and hurriedly left the office. About a month had passed. One day, the wife visited the office again, but this time she behaved as if in a hurry. She said that in the evening she would go to her friend Olivia's house because they hadn't seen each other for a long time and they needed to finish some tasks. Her husband didn't object. It was important to him that his wife informed him about her late return, so he wouldn't worry. He watched as Sarah gathered everything she needed from the table. Nervous movements and confusion revealed the woman's excitement. "Sarah, something happened?" he asked, approaching her. No, everything's fine," she quickly replied, avoiding eye contact with her husband. But her words didn't sound entirely sincere. "Are you sure?" he clarified. "Of course. I need to hurry," she said and left. Jacob understood that he wouldn't get anything from her right now and let his wife go. Perhaps she would tell him everything later. That same evening, Jacob went to the supermarket to buy groceries for dinner. In the checkout line, he saw Mason. He was a young man, Olivia's partner, his wife's friend. They'd lived together, and apparently he was sent to do the shopping, while the women chatted at home. The husband greeted Mason and asked if everything was all right with his wife, because Sarah seemed a bit unsettled today when she was getting ready to visit them. Maybe she was worried about her friend or something else. Mason was surprised by the question, since they didn't have any guests today. Olivia had sent him to the store for groceries so they could cook something together. They planned to spend the evening just the two of them. But I distinctly remember her saying she was going to Olivia's. So where did she go then? The husband mused. His conversation partner fell silent, and then his expression darkened. "Listen, I didn't pay much attention to it initially, but after what you said, I think I should tell you," he began. Mason shared that in recent weeks, Sarah had been talking to his girlfriend a lot, and in almost every conversation, they mentioned a certain name that, as he understood, was connected to some meetings. "I don't know if this will give you anything, but the name William comes up almost every time," he concluded. Jacob became deeply tense. He decided to call his wife right away, but Sarah didn't pick up and sent a text message. "I'm with Olivia. Let's talk later." The husband returned home and began to ponder the situation. He didn't want to dig into it. All he needed was the truth. Late in the evening, when Sarah came back, he decided to confront her. Calmly and confidently, He told his wife that he knew about her connection with William and that it would be best for them to part ways to avoid a scandal. He carefully observed her reaction. It was evident that she was caught off guard and blushed deeply. The provocation had worked. The man didn't expect things to go so smoothly. Sarah didn't argue or pretend not to understand. She simply gathered her essentials, didn't say goodbye, and left for her lover. Later, Jacob decided to terminate his collaboration with William, citing a breach of one of the contract clauses, and canceled his order. In the following month, to avoid thinking about the situation with his wife, Jacob immersed himself in work. He hadn't filed for divorce yet because he didn't want to think about it. He hadn't heard or seen Sarah since. And then something happened to her. She started periodically messaging him and inquiring about how he was doing. He simply ignored her messages. One day, while the man calmly worked in his office, Sarah unexpectedly came to him and asked which documents needed to be delivered and where. She looked at him obsequiously and smiled sweetly. He couldn't say anything for a whole minute. He was so taken aback by her audacity. That's when he realized that her relationship with her lover hadn't worked out. Jacob asked her directly why she had returned, and she began talking about all the years they had spent together, about missing him and wanting to get everything back. But he replied that she had already made her choice, and if it had turned out to be a failure, he couldn't help her. There was no turning back. Initially, Sarah tried to appear proud, but then she couldn't hold back her tears. She apologized, spoke of her love, but the man remained resolute. After that performance, he finally filed for divorce. Later, it turned out that William himself was married and temporarily living separately from his wife after an argument. They reconciled, and Sarah was no longer needed by the man. That's when she thought that if her husband didn't cause a scene and calmly spoke during their breakup, perhaps not all was lost and he could forgive her. However, she was deeply mistaken, because in life everything comes with a price. The cost of forgiving such betrayal was incredibly high. That's the story of their lives. Share your opinions and thoughts about the situation in the comments. What would you do if you were in the husband's place? And thank you for listening to the story until the end. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and be sure to like this video. You'll greatly help promote the channel. All the best.